Happy Pride Month, everybody. It is June. I know technically I'm late. It's June 2nd. Whatever. This is what I want to talk about today. I know that I have been fairly inconsistent with these videos. I'm aware. I have a life. I protest. I travel. Sorry. But anyway, the community, right? LGBTQIA community. I am incredibly frustrated. And here's why. I was just saying today, and a couple of days ago actually, I spoke at a workshop, or I guess you could call it a workshop. The topic was the intersection of queer and disabled. Now, this intersection is rather impressive. It's huge. There are so many people in the LGBTQIA community. It are also in the disability community. Okay. Here's the thing. And I probably am preaching to the choir here for a lot of folks. Ooh, I look rather ethereal. I like it. Enjoy my glow. So the community, right? I use the Q word, which is really scandalous to some people. It offends some folks, some older folks in the community, and I get it. I get why. That is my chosen word. So folks within this community, the queer community, I'm finding, and I've been finding since I was quite young, that if you are not beautiful or skinny or white, if you're not white, and you have some kind of other identity, maybe you're a person of color, maybe you're trans, maybe, I don't know, you're bi or pan, you're not going to be well accepted. You're just not. I'm so enraged. And the part that I really want to talk about is one that I'm leaving out, and I'm doing it on purpose. The last one that the last identity is cripples, disabled, people with disabilities. I'm so aggravated. A person who identifies in the LGBT community also is in the disability community, the disabled community, the cripples. They should be allowed to exist and be welcomed just as much as everyone else within the queer community. And that's all people with disabilities, all of them. Whether you're autistic, whether you are blind or deaf or have a wheelchair, it doesn't matter. And particularly people with invisible disabilities. We should all be accepted within this community, all of us. But there's a really ugly stigma. What do you do if you have a disability and you're just started to discover your sexuality and you want to go and join Tinder, OkCupid, or something, you want to start dating. Should you really have to make a decision whether or not you tell another person you're disabled? Should that really be a concern of yours? No, the other person should be fine with it. The other person should not be a big butt, a big douche, a jerk, and make you feel bad about your disability. That shouldn't happen. Stop making disabled people feel bad about being disabled. Stop making transgender people feel bad about being transgender. Stop hurting people of color. Stop it. I'm so aggravated by this point of contention within the community, just simply because the other person is different than what your ideal of the perfect queer person is. I'm so tired of it. I'm fat and disabled. I am a fat disabled woman. I am by no means the typical standard of ideal. I'm okay with that. Oh, how dare you come in here and not be okay with it either. It's not your place. Other things. So within this talk that I did at a local center, a local LGBT center, I touched on subjects like the object of beauty, standard of beauty within the queer community, because there is one. The fact that not only in your typical LGBT community, but also in the disability community, much of the faces you're going to see are white men. Now, I love my ladies. I love when they're in a leadership role, and I don't think it happens quite as often as it really should. And I particularly love it when it is a woman, cis or not, a woman of color. I love it. So it frustrates me that this is not the reality. That white men, even in these communities, these specific communities, are still part of the leadership, are still the face of the leadership. Why? This is not representative of the people that live in these communities. It's just not. The people who are disproportionately affected by many or all of the disability issues, who are going to feel the worst effects, people of color. They just are. I can say till I'm blue in the face that I'm facing poverty. And I mean, I have. But I'm not a person of color who are going to be affected more. And I'm not trying to play Struggle Olympics. I'm not interested in doing that. But I am more than aware of my privilege. I'm not saying that white people don't have hard lives. I'm saying that there is an inherent privilege just by the fact that I was born with the skin color that I have. And I feel as though my beautiful siblings in both communities that are people of color get the worst of the worst treatment. And it's not right. It's unacceptable. People keep saying throughout the decades, it's insert year. Why are we still doing this? Are we just going to continue to ask the question every single year? It's 2019. Why is this still acceptable? It's 2020. Why is this still acceptable? Or are we going to act? Are we going to do something about it? So as I'm giving this talk, which I could go on and on about, I touched on subjects specific to disability that no one really talks about. And that includes, say, Barb and Susan have been together for 60 years and they get older. And as they age, they become harder for them to live in the home that they've lived in because their home's not accessible anymore. Well, at all. Barb and Susan decide to live out their golden years in a nearby facility, a nearby nursing facility. Except when they get there, because this facility is unaccepting of lesbian relationships, they get separated. Maybe only Barb is allowed to live in this facility, and Susan's told that she has to live somewhere else because it would be inappropriate to have both of them living in the same place. It would make the other residents uncomfortable. So Barb and Susan get separated, except one ends up in a facility miles and miles away. And because they can't drive, they don't see each other anymore unless family is willing to help. That's tragic. That makes me want to cry. And that's the kind of thing that actually happens. Or say only one partner is alive and they go into a facility and staff finds out that this person is gay and they don't approve of that lifestyle. And the only people who are able to come in and care for this person don't approve of the fact this person is gay, to the point where they start abusing them. And so what is this person living in the facility to do? Because they know that if they were to report it, who are they going to report it to? And if they do report it to a supervisor, a manager, or whatever, is the person who's abusing them going to find out and then come back and retaliate? Is that person then going to have their mobility equipment, their catheters, their whatever, their food taken away from them in retaliation? Is the abuse going to get worse? These are things that all of a sudden you have to think about. Say someone is transgender, they go into a facility and they're not recognized for who they are. So their treatments are taken away from them. Their tea is taken away from them. And they're dead named. And only referred to as the gender of their birth. I don't think I have to explain how I feel about facilities. they're ugly. But you have unique challenges when in unique situations when you're in the queer community and all of a sudden you have to rely on another person to care for you. Maybe you've just met that person, maybe you haven't they haven't been working with you for very long, but it should not be a thing that you have to find out the hard way how they feel about your life, about you as a person. I I had an attendant that um as she would assist me with catheterization, would say things like, "Oh, don't worry, I don't like girls like that." And I can't explain to you how uncomfortable that made me. Just the one comment in an already really sensitive situation where someone has to insert a catheter into a sensitive part of your body. For someone to make a comment like that is humiliating and horrible and wrong. And I just, okay. Uh, I want to be clear by saying that I am incredibly frustrated that the situations that I've mentioned continue. There's no protections. There's no way, unless you can somehow escape the scenario. But even living in the community, you have to be real careful about who you hire to work with you. Because again, if they don't agree with the way you live your life or who you are, they can torture you. They can make your life miserable and make you terrified of firing them. After discussing this, I had looked out into the crowd and seen a lot of really shocked faces. They'd never thought about situations like this. They never thought about what was going to happen when they got older. And I could see that recognition on their faces. So we talked about it a little bit. Many times you're going to find that people in the community are involved in some way with healthcare, whether it's working in a facility, assisted living, whatever, or working in health professions, like doctors, nurses. And that makes it really difficult for a disabled person who's also queer to um, to date as well, because there is this feeling that, oh, I'm gonna love Hina. Okay. There's this feeling that all of a sudden you're gonna become impatient, that no longer will you be seen as a sexual being, but um, you will be seen as someone that this other person has to care for, and that can open up a whole host of issues. Um, it happened in my own personal life. No longer did this person see me as their wife, they saw me as someone to care for. And it's not specifically an LGBT thing, it is a disabled person dating a non disabled person issue. Um, it can become real easy to be seen as a burden. And it's 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 a serious problem that ends up breaking up relationships. if there's not enough communication or of what the expectation is should someone's disability progress or as you get older and you obtain disabilities. These are not conversations people have because they don't think about it. When you become a senior, you obtain disabilities. You just do. Whether that's you can't see as well anymore, can't walk as well anymore. Suddenly you're faced with a wheelchair. What do you think that is? I want to throttle people who have the audacity to say to me, oh no, I'm not disabled, I'm just old. No. No, my friend. The second your butt hits that wheelchair, you're disabled. And if they don't want to identify, fine. But don't make it seem like it's an ugly word. Don't make it seem like it's the worst thing that's going to ever happen to you. It's not. There are far worse things than being disabled. I personally think it's great. I love my community. But back to the issue at hand. We talked about what we could do to make this community more inclusive to people with disabilities, to disabled people. And sometimes it's just as simple as, hey, if you happen to see a staple in the LGBT community that isn't accessible, ask them why they're not accessible. Tell them that's unacceptable and that there are people in this community that would love to come and spend money at this place, but they can't because they can't get in. Or ask why there's local events, whether it be drag shows or whatever. Ask them why they don't have interpreters. Because I bet you that there's deaf people that want to come. Ask why there's not visual description. I'm sure there's blind people that want to come. The point is, if you don't see access in the community, and our community is particularly bad at this. If you don't see access in the community, ask the owner why. Demand access. Say that if you can't bring your friends in, if you can't bring yourself in when you were the disabled person, if you can't bring your family members in, why should you go to these establishments and give them your money? If there's not access for all, there's access for none. This is a part of being a good ally. Would I ever go into an establishment that said, oh no, we don't let transgender folk in? Or, oh no, we don't let people of color in? No! I would never do that. So why is it acceptable to continue to give money to queer businesses that are down a flight of stairs or that don't have a bathroom that people can use, that are not big enough for wheelchairs or don't have interpreters? Why is that acceptable? It's not. It's not. In a place, I live in a place that has the largest deaf community, the largest deaf community per capita. For me to go to a place that was like, oh no, we can't have interpreters, sorry, that would be unacceptable. Unacceptable. For me to go to a place and find out that all of a sudden I can't get in, why should I have to accept that? Why? in the age that we have had the ADA for so long. It's been over 20 years, friends. Why is that acceptable to have LGBT centers and buildings, restaurants or bars, gay bars? Why is it acceptable that they have stairs? Why is it acceptable not to have an entrance that I can even get in? And why is it acceptable to come to me and say, oh, well, you can get on the bottom floor, but the bar's not accessible, so sorry about that. Or you can get in and you can drink, but the bathroom's upstairs and you wouldn't be able to get there. Why is that acceptable? It's not. It is not. I used to live in Orlando. What happened to Pulse was horrific. Horrific. It's still hard for me to talk about. I've been there. I've been to Pulse. If I were in that building at that time, it wasn't accessible. There would be no way for me to get out. I would be trapped and I would be dead. And I think about that. I think about that all the time. If something were to happen in this place that I'm in, could I get out? Most of the time, the answer is no. Because for some reason, quote unquote, queer safe spaces aren't really safe spaces to people with disabilities. Furthermore, here in my city, they wanted to have a memorial for the Pulse victims. Great. Okay. I naturally wanted to go. I knew 2 people in this list. I was devastated. We lost 2 amazing souls that I'll never be able to see or talk to again. So I went to this event. Come to find out, it was held in an inaccessible bar. It was held in an inaccessible gay bar. And not only that, but the area in front of this place that it was being held at, where everybody talked and shared and told stories, was not fully accessible either. Now, there were interpreters, but if you had any other kind of physical disability, you couldn't see anything. You couldn't get inside to then have a drink with your family and mourn together. Even if I were to get inside, the bathrooms weren't accessible. And when I said something about it, when I expressed my outrage that how dare they hold a memorial at an inaccessible bar, and I had felt a personal outrage because of the circumstances of being from that area, they said, oh, we didn't really think about it. We can't trust the other bars to hold this event. Okay. I see. My heart broke. My heart broke in pieces. Because that very blatantly said, all are welcome, except those who are disabled. And there was no fix. There was no offer to hold it somewhere else. There was no accommodation. And so then I put it behind me. And I still tried to work with the community and making sure that all rallies and all events and all protests were held in accessible spaces. Because I do not believe in only fighting for people with disabilities. I believe in fighting for all people who are currently having their rights stepped all over. I believe in fighting for my siblings of color. I believe in fighting for LGBTQIA issues. I believe in fighting for immigration issues. But these things aren't accessible to us. If your protest is not on an accessible route so that people with disabilities can be dropped off in the location that everyone else is meeting up at, if your meeting is not in a location that is accessible, and I mean fully accessible, so that no one has to ring a doorbell to get in when everyone else can just open the door. Or maybe your bathrooms are not accessible. These are things that are unacceptable. And I'm finding that this is the case over and over and over again. Every time I try to get involved with something, there's some kind of access barrier. And the response that I've gotten is a very, I'm not making accusations against you as a person. I'm telling you that I want to participate and I want to be an ally, but I have been accused of trying to make this issue more important than what the mission is. That's not the case. When people call for access, it's the same fight. It's the same thing. We're just asking you to open the door so that we can get in and fight with you. That's all. I'm not trying to make disability issues more important than queer issues or than, people of color, of immigration, none of that. I'm not trying to make it more important. I just want to be able to get in and hear the different viewpoints so that I can go and use my privilege. I'm happy to do my own research, but that means I'm going to be stuck in my apartment not doing the actual work because I can't get outside to where I need to be. This is not inclusivity. This is not including everybody in the community. There are people with disabilities who want to be able to come out to pride festivals and whatever that are not accepted in the community, so they just don't come. to bring this full circle, I will just say there is and should not be an asterisk in the LGBT community that says, except for people of color, transgender, bi and pan, and disabled. That shouldn't be there. I hope that my ramblings made sense. And I hope that if this is not something you had previously thought about, that you do now.